Welcome to the Strategy Sync YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries. Today, we are taking a massive deep dive into a really fascinating new book.
Oh, it's an incredible one.
Yeah, it really is. We are looking at Freedom of Money, which is the highly anticipated, deeply personal memoir of Changpeng Zhao.
Right. Widely known across the globe just as CZ.
Exactly. He's the founder and the former CEO of Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange. And this book, it's just an extraordinary document.
It really is. I mean, it isn't just some chronological recounting of a tech startup's rise to market dominance. It's way more than that.
Yeah, it goes way deeper.
It's a profound exploration of systems, of operational trust, and really the absolute limits of human control. Because we're talking about an individual who built a trillion-dollar financial ecosystem literally from scratch.
Right. And in doing so, he basically collided head-on with the most powerful traditional enforcement systems on the entire planet.
Which is just a wild trajectory.
It is. So our mission today is to help you, the listener, truly understand this profound journey. We want to unpack the hidden operational mechanics of global money that this book exposes.
And, maybe more importantly, look at the deeply personal price that gets paid when the ethos of permissionless technology really clashes with the world.
Yeah, that prevailing idea that code is completely impartial and anyone can participate, when that collides violently with the rigid realities of global regulation, things get messy.
Very messy. The sheer scope of the story is just staggering.
It really is. I mean, we are talking about a narrative that starts with a kid flipping burgers in Vancouver.
Right.
And then it scales up to a CEO processing billions of dollars a day and ends up with that exact same man sitting in a federal prison cell in California, literally chopping onions for 3 hours a day.
It's a stunning, almost Shakespearean arc, honestly.
Yeah.
And to truly grasp how someone builds the architecture for global crypto, trading the system that redefined how millions of people interact with value, we first have to understand his mind.
Right. How was this formed?
Exactly. We have to understand how he learned to see the entire world as just a series of interconnected systems and variables and rules.
And to understand that, the book takes us back to China, specifically Lianyang in 1977.
Yeah, which is a very specific context.
It is. He was born just a year after the Cultural Revolution ended. His father was a university professor, and his mother was a teacher.
And you have to think about what that meant back then.
Right. In that specific time and place, being an educated family didn't mean you had privilege.
Not at all.
It meant you were a family under active suspicion. His father was literally labeled a bourgeois intellectual.
Which had immediate and really destabilizing consequences for his childhood. I mean, the book details how by the time he was 12 years old, his family had moved 12 times.
12 times by age 12.
Yeah. Think about the psychological impact of that constant displacement. When your physical environment is continually shifting like that, you just can't rely on local nuances to survive.
You'd have to adapt instantly.
Exactly. And he notes in the book that he simply stopped bothering to make close long-term friends. He learned to pack his entire life into a single bag incredibly quickly.
Oh.
To navigate new schools without any hesitation, and even pick up regional dialects that shifted every few years.
I was actually thinking about this as I read the book, and it almost feels like he was made rootless by design.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, it's almost like writing a piece of software code like Java, for example, that is specifically compiled to run on any operating system. It's completely agnostic to the local hardware environment,
He was programmed for portability.
Exactly, programmed for portability. So do you think this constant uprooting explains why years later he built his company with that famous or maybe infamous headquarters-less structure?
That is a brilliant analogy. And yeah, it absolutely laid the groundwork for his future organizational philosophy.
Right.
I mean, when you are a child in that kind of chaotic environment, you naturally seek refuge in what is permanent.
Right. What doesn't change.
And for him, as he explicitly states in the book, that refuge was mathematics, because numbers are universal.
Right. A math equation is a math equation anywhere.
Exactly. The rules of algebra or geometry, they apply regardless of what dialect the teacher is speaking or what city you've just been suddenly moved to. Math was a system he could trust when his societal system was entirely unpredictable.
That reliance on the universal really came to a head in 1989. His father had managed to get to Canada to study, and the family finally secured the papers to join him in Vancouver.
Right, he was 12 at this point.
Yeah, 12 years old. And the book has this highly specific, really visceral anecdote about that arrival that I absolutely love, even though he mentions in the text that it's become a bit of a cliche in media profiles about him over the years.
Ah, yes. The famous first taste of fresh milk story.
That's the one.
He describes stepping out of the airport in Vancouver in late summer. He notes the light being impossibly bright, the air smelling intensely of pine and ocean.
Such a vivid memory.
It is. But the detail that permanently lodged in his memory was drinking fresh milk from a wax carton. Because growing up in China during that era, his experience with dairy was entirely limited to, like, powdered milk.
Or occasionally a tin of sweetened condensed milk, right?
Exactly.
And he says the fresh milk was ice cold, it was rich, and it tasted quite literally like abundance.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because how the milk functions in his memory is really as a mechanism for understanding systems. It wasn't just a beverage to him.
No, it was bigger than that.
It was a sensory representation of a dramatic, structural shift in his economic environment. They didn't arrive as refugees fleeing a war zone. They arrived as immigrants seeking opportunity within a completely new operating system.
But they were still very poor.
Oh, absolutely. They lived in subsidized dormitory housing at the University of British Columbia. His mother, who had been this respected teacher back home, worked in a garment factory.
Right, coming home exhausted with her hands literally stained from the textile dye.
Yeah. So the fresh milk was this small, tangible proof that the new system they had entered had the capacity to provide things the old system simply could not.
But that abundance certainly didn't mean leisure for him. Because money was incredibly tight, he had to work.
Like a lot of immigrant kids.
Yeah. At 14, he gets a job at McDonald's. And this is where the book dives into something that I think you, the listener, can definitely relate to, but he views it entirely through an engineer's lens.
I'll write the calculation.
Yes. He's making about $5 an hour, which was the minimum wage in British Columbia in the mid-90s, and he has this sudden realization while standing at the cash register, just staring up at the menu board.
He calculates that a Big Mac extra value meal costs roughly 1 hour of his labor.
It's just a profound systemic realization for a 14-year-old. He didn't just see a burger up there, he saw the exchange rate of human energy.
He really did. He notes that the meal he could assemble in 90 seconds on the line took him 60 minutes of his literal life to earn the money to buy. He writes that what he learned at McDonald's wasn't, operational efficiency or how to make a hamburger. It was the weight of money.
The weight of money. That's a great phrase.
When money is tied directly to your physical labor, your sweat, your time, you understand its value on a visceral, uncompromising level.
Imagine having that realization so young. You just stop seeing a $20 bill as paper and you start seeing it as 4 hours of your literal life.
Exactly.
And he didn't just work the line at McDonald's. He also took on late night shifts, working the till at a Chevron gas station.
Right, the graveyard shift.
Yeah. And this is where he gets a front row seat to how established systems actually fail in the real world. He tells this really compelling story about catching a counterfeit $20 bill from a customer at 2 in the morning.
Yes, and he points out a really crucial detail there. He didn't catch the counterfeit because he was some kind of currency expert or because he was closely inspecting the watermarks under a light.
Right, it wasn't some Sherlock Holmes moment.
No, he caught it because the physical texture of the paper just felt wrong against his fingers as he took it. The gas station had strict corporate protocols, exactly how to handle cash drops, how to process credit cards, how to respond to alarms.
But he realized in that exact moment that protocols are entirely vulnerable.
Because the weakest point in any system is a human being.
A human who is tired or distracted or simply not paying close attention at 2 in the morning.
Exactly.
Oh.
You can have the most robust compliance manual in the world, but if the execution relies on a fatigued teenager at the end of a double shift, your system has a massive security hole.
That's such a good point.
He was intuitively mapping these systemic vulnerabilities long before he ever wrote a single line of production code.
He was just gathering this massive archive of human failure modes.
Yeah, he really was.
So eventually he channels that systems thinking into a computer science degree at McGill University in Montreal. He learns to code properly, not just basic scripts, but deep architectural programming.
Building the foundation.
Right. And then in 1997, at age 20, he makes the massive leap. He moves to Tokyo.
Which is wild. He doesn't speak Japanese. He has zero connections.
Nothing. But he goes to work writing software for the matching engine of the Tokyo Stock Exchange.
This is an absolutely critical pivot in his life and really in the book. For our listeners who know market infrastructure, a matching engine is the very heart, the central nervous system of a financial exchange.
Right, it's the core.
It is the algorithm that pairs buyers and sellers. When a buyer wants to purchase shares at a certain price and a seller wants to sell at that price, the engine matches them. But it has to do this in milliseconds, across thousands of concurrent orders, flawlessly.
Because a mistake there is catastrophic.
Oh, totally. A mistake in a matching engine doesn't just result in a lost trade. It destroys institutional market confidence entirely.
But here's what I really want to dig into. He gets to Tokyo, and he discovers something that completely shatters his previous assumptions.
Yes, his view of the markets.
Right. He went in thinking that global financial markets were these fluid, organic, almost biological entities driven entirely by human sentiment and news.
Like a living organism.
Exactly. But when he looks under the hood at the code level, he realizes they're actually just rigid, brittle systems of heavily enforced rules. We are talking about price limits, volume collars, trading halts. How does an engineer process that?
Well, if we connect this to the broader theme of the book, he had an architectural epiphany here. He spent his time programming what engineers call edge cases.
Let's explain that for the listener real quick.
Sure. Edge cases are the 1 in a million anomalous scenarios where the system might spontaneously break.
Right, the weird stuff.
Like, what happens if a major corporation files for bankruptcy at the exact microsecond a massive block trade is processing? What happens if liquidity completely vanishes on one side of the order book?
Unlikely, but possible.
Exactly. He realized that the seemingly arbitrary rules of the Tokyo Stock Exchange weren't just bureaucratic red tape created by regulators sitting in suits.
No, they were scars.
Precisely. They were the accumulated wisdom of decades of market crashes, panics, cascading liquidations, and really catastrophic failures.
Every rule was written in blood, basically.
Yeah, financial blood. Every single circuit breaker, every margin requirement represented a historical lesson learned at immense human and financial cost. The skeleton of finance, as he elegantly calls it, is specifically designed to prevent past failure modes from repeating.
That's a great metaphor, the skeleton of finance.
And he learned to respect the absolute necessity of these rules by physically writing the code that enforced them.
The irony of this is just staggering to me. I mean, really think about it. The man who would go on to champion the chaotic, supposedly unregulated frontier of cryptocurrency.
Right, the poster child for permissionless finance.
Exactly. This guy literally cut his teeth writing the exact code that enforced the strictest traditional financial regulations in the world. He was meticulously building the cages before he ever decided to break them.
That paradox is entirely central to his character, and really to the narrative of his entire company later on. He didn't rebel against traditional finance out of ignorance.
No, he knew exactly how it worked.
He rebelled out of deep structural intimacy with its limitations. He took that rigorous mindset from Tokyo to Bloomberg Tradebook in New York, where he handled high-frequency futures trading.
Right.
And eventually to Shanghai, where he started his own traditional finance software company, Fusion Systems. He had completely mastered centralized permission systems.
But then the narrative of the book shifts gears dramatically because this masterful systems thinker is about to discover an architecture with no central authority whatsoever.
And it fundamentally rewrites his brain.
It really does. And it all happens at a poker table, of all places.
I know it sounds like a Hollywood script, but yeah. A friendly poker table in 2013.
So we're in Shanghai. He is playing high-stakes Texas, Hold'em with some prominent tech and finance friends.
Including Bobby Lee, who was running the BTC China exchange at the time.
Right. And over the cards, Bobby introduces him to the concept of Bitcoin. He's intrigued, goes home, and prints out the now legendary 9-page Bitcoin white paper written by the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto.
Which is a brilliant piece of writing.
It is. Now, the book makes it very clear, and I think this is vital for you, the listener, to grasp. He didn't read this document and think, oh, wow, I'm going to get incredibly rich.
Not at all.
He didn't see a speculative asset to trade. He read it as a systems engineer evaluating a completely new piece of infrastructure.
That distinction is paramount. You have to remember he had spent 15 years building financial infrastructure that strictly required intermediaries.
Right, middlemen everywhere.
Think about the friction he was used to dealing with. clearinghouses, correspondent banks, custody brokers, settlement layers that took T+2 days just to finalize a simple trade.
Just a massive web of trusted third parties.
Exactly. But the Bitcoin white paper presented a mathematically sound system where cryptographic value could be transferred directly peer-to-peer across the internet.
With no one in the middle.
Verified by a decentralized network of nodes, with absolutely no central entity in control. It solved the double spending problem without needing a trusted third party.
Which is huge.
To a systems architect who was accustomed to building massive centralized servers to enforce trust, this was an elegant, paradigm-shattering piece of infrastructure. It wasn't just a digital coin to him. It was a completely new skeleton for global finance.
And he became completely obsessed. The book details how he just devoured academic cryptography papers, scoured the early Bitcoin Talk forum posts, and studied the open source code line by line.
He was all in.
And then he makes the gamble of a lifetime. His conviction level just goes completely off the charts. In 2014, he decides to actually go all in. And I mean that literally. He sells his apartment in Shanghai to buy Bitcoin.
We really have to pause here and emphasize the magnitude of this risk.
Yeah, it's crazy.
In Chinese culture, and particularly for an entrepreneur running a fledgling startup like he was with Fusion Systems, owning real estate is the ultimate anchor.
Right, it's safety.
That apartment was his safety net, his hedge against failure. If the startup collapsed, he still had the apartment. But he liquidates it. He puts the entire proceeds into Bitcoin.
And almost immediately after he executes the purchase, the market just violently crashes.
It's devastating.
It crashes hard. He buys in, and the price plummets, leaving him underwater by $500,000.
$500,000.
And it doesn't just bounce right back. He is down $500,000 for 2 agonizing years. 2 years.
Just vaporized on paper.
Yeah. I really have to push back on his framing here, though. In the book, he frames this as a testament to his visionary conviction. But let's be real, isn't this just reckless, degenerate gambling masked as visionary conviction? It's like burning your lifeboats before you even know if the island you just landed on has fresh water.
That is exactly the pushback he has received for years. And he actually addresses that exact criticism head-on in the memoir. Many of his own family members and peers called him reckless and foolish.
Understandably.
But he draws a very sharp line between blind gambling and calculated risk based on deep technical understanding. He understood the underlying code of the Bitcoin protocol. He knew the cryptographic infrastructure was sound, even if the speculative market was panicking.
So he wasn't betting on the hype.
Right. He wasn't betting on a meme. He was betting on the math. However, he definitely does not downplay the severe psychological toll it took on him. The book delves deeply into the behavioral economics concept of loss aversion.
Right. The psychological reality that losing $500,000 feels significantly more painful than gaining $500,000 feels good. The emotional asymmetry of loss.
Yes. He talks openly about the sleepless nights, the gnawing anxiety in his stomach as he watched his net worth fluctuate wildly by tens of thousands of dollars every single day.
I can't even imagine that stress.
But this 2-year period is the crucible. Enduring that crushing, sustained pressure really forged his emotional discipline. He writes something very poignant in this section. The only way to develop true stress management and ironclad conviction is by physically experiencing the situations that demand them.
Wow. Yeah, you can just theorize about it.
You cannot read a book about stress to become resilient. This intense trial by fire became his foundational training. When you survive a 70% drawdown on your entire life savings without panic selling, you build a psychological armor that is absolutely necessary for surviving the inherent brutal volatility of the crypto industry.
Okay, so he survives the multi-year crash. The market eventually thaws and begins to recover. And he realizes something fundamental.
That he needs to build.
Exactly. He doesn't just want to be a passive participant or an investor in this new decentralized system anymore. He wants to be the architect. He sees the existing crypto exchanges like Mt. Gox, which famously imploded, and realizes their matching engines are built on
From the Tokyo Stock Exchange.
Right. He knows he can build something exponentially faster and more stable. And that brings us to the birth of Binance. He teams up with Yi, his co-founder.
Who was incredibly crucial to the success.
Absolutely. He notes in the book that she was a powerhouse, much better at narrative building, community management, and marketing than he was. Together, they draft and launch the Binance coin, or BNB, white paper.
And it is critical to note how he viewed that specific white paper. He didn't see it as a marketing brochure or some flashy pitch deck to lure venture capitalists.
No, it was a technical document.
He viewed it as a moral and technical contract with the public. They laid out the exact tokenomics, exactly what the matching engine architecture would look like, and they asked for funding directly from the community through an initial coin offering.
The famous 16-day launch. They raised $15 million in just over 2 weeks.
Incredibly fast.
And they launched the exchange on July 14th, 2017. And talk about catching lightning in a bottle. The timing was almost absurd. They launched right into the teeth of the massive, historic 2017 retail crypto bull market.
The growth was explosive, almost violent in its velocity. The book describes the operational reality of those early days vividly.
It sounds chaotic.
Oh, it was. The internal motto was literally no daytime. Engineers were sleeping under their desks on yoga mats.
Unbelievable.
The customer support queue was drowning in tens of thousands of unresolved tickets as millions of users tried to register simultaneously. The trading volume was spiking to levels that would trigger automatic circuit breakers and crash almost any traditional financial system in the world.
But this is where his background becomes his superpower. He had built the matching engines for the Tokyo Stock Exchange.
Exactly.
He knew exactly how to build architecture that survived edge cases. The book has this amazing, almost comical illustrative detail. A massive, unprecedented spike in global trading volume hits their servers.
The ultimate test.
The entire engineering team is literally holding their breath, braced for the system to buckle and just go completely offline. And it doesn't.
Just keeps running.
The distributed architecture, the microservices they had built, handled the load perfectly. The matching engine just keeps pairing trades without a single millisecond of latency. And he actually felt a profound sense of disappointment.
Which is such a pure, unadulterated engineer's reaction.
Totally.
He had spent weeks preparing disaster recovery protocols, hot swappable server backups, and emergency state rollbacks. When the crisis didn't materialize and the system held, he felt almost let down because his fail-safes weren't tested in live combat.
You wanted to see it break just to fix it.
Pretty much. But it proved that their underlying technical architecture was remarkably solid. They had built a Formula One engine while the rest of the industry was basically driving go-karts.
Now, to achieve this incredible speed and scale, the company operated in a very unique, highly controversial way. Remember earlier we talked about his childhood moving 12 times, being rootless and adaptable.
Yes, the portability.
Well, he baked that exact DNA into the corporate structure of the exchange.
Right.
He built it as a headquarters list company, fully remote, geographically distributed, operating across dozens of time zones simultaneously.
And this organizational decision is explored deeply in the book, really highlighting the profound duality of decentralization.
Yep.
On one hand, this rootlessness was a massive strategic feature. It created immense agility. In the traditional financial world, if a regulator in one jurisdiction suddenly changed the rules overnight, a bank with a massive physical footprint, thousands of employees, and a skyscraper headquarters would be completely paralyzed.
They'd be stuck.
But for Binance, if a jurisdiction became hostile, they simply didn't have a physical footprint to dismantle. They could just route their server traffic and operations around slow, legacy bureaucracy and maintain their incredible speed of execution.
I have to push back on this, though, because it feels a bit disingenuous to me.
Okay, let's hear it.
As a listener, you really have to wonder, was decentralization just a highly convenient philosophical excuse to systematically avoid localized compliance?
The regulatory arbitrage argument.
Exactly. It sounds a lot like saying, oh, well, we exist in the cloud, we don't have a physical address, therefore your terrestrial laws regarding anti-money laundering simply do not apply to us.
That is the exact tension the book addresses head-on, particularly in the supplementary essay titled Regulation is a Conversation. He's quite candid in his retrospection here.
He admits to it.
He admits that while the remote structure allowed them to hire top-tier talent globally and outmaneuver competitors, it also acted as a critical bug in their cultural operating system. Operating entirely through screens eroded the intangible human cohesion of in-person culture.
Right. You lose the water cooler conversation.
You lose the ability to read a colleague's body language when a really risky decision is being made in a meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But more critically, as he acknowledges, this agility planted the deep seeds for severe regulatory blind spots. When you aren't physically rooted in a community, when you don't commute past the local regulatory offices, when your kids don't go to school with the local lawmakers' kids, it is dangerously easy to view local regulations merely as technical obstacles to be engineered around.
Instead of actual laws you have to follow.
Exactly. Rather than as binding legal frameworks you are obligated to respect. He admits that what seemed like their greatest strength, their ability to bypass bureaucracy at light speed, eventually metastasized into a massive existential compliance deficit.
And that deficit, combined with that breakneck speed, inevitably means the system is going to break, because you just can't run a financial engine at light speed indefinitely without eventually hitting a wall.
The scale practically guarantees a failure.
Which brings us to the operational crises that really defined his tenure: hacks, contagion, and systemic risk. Let's look at the defining moment of vulnerability, the 2019 hack.
What is referred to internally as the night of 7,000 BTC.
Yes. Hackers managed to execute a highly sophisticated multi-vector attack, breaching their hot wallets and stealing 7,000 Bitcoin in a single transaction block.
Which was huge.
At the time, that was roughly $40 million, an absolutely staggering amount of capital. And he describes this intense, physically crushing feeling of shame and personal responsibility in the book. This wasn't a matching engine glitch where a trade didn't execute. This was real users' actual wealth being stolen on his watch.
And this is where we see the concepts for the book's essays, Trust is Operational and Crisis Reveals Culture, play out in real time. He realized that in a crisis, particularly in a nascent industry like crypto, panic spreads rapidly through ambiguity.
Right. The unknown is terrifying.
If users are locked out of their accounts and don't know what's happening, they immediately assume the exchange is insolvent and the money is gone forever.
So how did they handle it mechanically? Because this is where they really diverged from the old Mt. Gox playbook.
They made a decision that set a completely new operational standard in the industry. Radical, immediate transparency.
They didn't hide it.
They didn't try to hide the breach under the guise of unscheduled maintenance. They explicitly communicated the exact nature of the hack right away. But more importantly, he announced immediately that they would use their own SafeU fund.
The Secure Asset Fund for users.
Yes, the SFU fund, to cover 100% of the user losses.
Let's explain SafeU for you listeners, because it's a really brilliant mechanism. They didn't just pull this money out of thin air to cover the $40 million. From the very beginning, they had been allocating a set percentage of all trading fees into a cold storage reserve fund, specifically for this exact doomsday scenario.
It was proactive self-insurance.
Right. And he says in the book, utilizing the SafeU fund to cover the losses wasn't an act of corporate generosity. It was an absolute obligation. It was the bare minimum standard required to maintain the ecosystem's trust.
Which perfectly illustrates the concept that trust is operational. Trust isn't a marketing slogan you put on a billboard or a website banner. Trust is the mechanical action you take when your system inevitably fails.
It's what you actually do.
Exactly. He points out that having clear escalation paths and conducting honest postmortems, where the engineering team focuses entirely on understanding the technical vectors the hackers used, rather than just firing the junior engineer who left an API key exposed, are what actually preserve a company's culture during an existential threat. You fix the system, not the blame.
That's a powerful philosophy. But dealing with constant crisis and external attacks also led to some, let's say, less healthy psychological coping mechanisms.
Oh, definitely.
And this part of the book is genuinely fascinating because we've all seen it play out publicly on Twitter. In January 2023, he tweeted out his 4 main priorities for the upcoming year. The 4th priority was a simple directive to his team and followers: ignore FUD, fake news, attacks, etc.
And FUD in the crypto lexicon referring to fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Right. And the crypto community latched onto this number 4 with incredible fervor. It didn't just remain a priority list, it became a global meme.
It mutated entirely in the public sphere. Whenever anyone criticized the company on social media, whether it was a bad faith troll or a legitimate investigative journalist asking highly specific questions about their corporate structure, or even a regulator issuing a formal warning to the community, and quite often the CEO himself, would just reply with a single digit.
Think about the danger of that. I was reading this and thinking, it's exactly like using a large umbrella to shield yourself from the rain.
Right.
Initially, it's a great tool, it keeps you dry, but eventually you just keep the umbrella pulled down tight over your face to block out everything, and because you're so focused on staying dry, it completely blocks your view of the Category 5 hurricane that is rapidly approaching on the horizon.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it perfectly encapsulates the essay in the book titled Community Can Carry Meaning. The essay details how a passionate community can deeply distort an original idea when the symbolism outruns the substance.
It started as a personal thing, right?
Yeah, he originally intended for as a personal mental health and productivity hack. Just a simple heuristic to remind himself not to get bogged down by the endless toxicity of crypto Twitter. But in the public arena, it became a reflexive, tribal dismissal of any critical feedback whatsoever.
It just became this massive echo chamber.
Precisely. Dismissing FUD morphed into a psychological defense mechanism for avoiding legitimate existential regulatory warnings. If you program your culture to automatically categorize every single external critique as just FUD, you systematically eliminate the feedback loops required to realize that your compliance program is actually failing.
You become blind to your own faults.
The community's loyalty blinded the leadership to their own systemic rot.
And while they were busy ignoring the FUD and tweeting for it, everyone, a literal hurricane was destroying one of their biggest competitors.
The collapse of FTX.
November 2022.
What he refers to in the book as the 3 days of thin ice.
Listeners, this part of the memoir reads like a high-stakes financial thriller. Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO of FTX, privately contacts him and basically says, "I need help."
Unbeknownst to the public at that exact moment, FTX has a staggering $8 billion hole in its balance sheet.
$8 billion of retail customer money just completely gone.
He pulls his most trusted executive team together. The initial logic was deeply systemic. If FTX, the second largest exchange, collapsed overnight, the contagion would spread through the deeply intertwined crypto markets and potentially destroy the entire industry.
It would be a nuclear winter.
So, to stem the panic, they publicly sign a non-binding letter of intent to acquire FTX and assume their liabilities. They immediately deploy specialized teams to conduct rapid due diligence.
And here's where the mechanics of fraud are laid absolutely bare. Within hours of looking at the internal ledgers, his analysts come back and say, there isn't just a liquidity gap here, there's a massive structural hole.
The money wasn't just tied up, it was missing.
They discovered that customer deposits had been secretly moved, used as collateral to borrow against highly illiquid tokens like FTT, and funneled directly to Alameda Research, FTX's sister trading firm. It wasn't a bank run, it was structural, systemic rot.
And this presents him with an agonizing, almost impossible ethical and business dilemma.
What does he do?
Does he go through with the acquisition, absorbing this massive debt to save FTX and protect the broader crypto industry from a catastrophic multi-year crash? Or does he walk away, protecting his own company and users from inheriting a massively fraudulent, toxic balance sheet, knowing full well that his withdrawal will trigger the collapse?
He decides to walk away.
He had to.
They pull the letter of intent. The news breaks. FTX collapses spectacularly, filing for bankruptcy. The crypto winter gets incredibly cold. Millions of retail users lose their life savings. It was an absolute bloodbath.
He reflects on the heavy burden of this decision in the text. He notes that due diligence wasn't just corporate bureaucracy or legal paperwork in this instance. It was the exact razor-thin difference between responsibility and complicity.
That's a heavy line.
If he had bought FTX, his company would have been actively complicit in the cover-up of that $8 billion hole. He writes a powerful line. Sometimes walking away is significantly braver than staying, even when you know with absolute certainty that walking away will let the contagion spread.
Wow.
It highlights a recurring theme of the book's second half. You cannot save a bad actor without fatally risking your own integrity.
And yet, despite successfully navigating the FTX minefield and avoiding that specific contagion, he couldn't outrun his own systemic flaws. The compliance deficit we talked about earlier.
The bill finally came due.
It did, and the weight of that bill was unimaginable.
He had spent his entire adult life from Tokyo to building Binance constructing systems where code is law. In his world, if the cryptography is sound and the matching engine executes the trade based on the programmed rules, the trade is valid and final.
Math is math.
But ultimately, he collided with the enforcement apparatus of the United States government, a system where law is law and the mathematical elegance of your code absolutely does not matter.
The Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission, along with the Department of Justice, file massive, sweeping lawsuits against his company and him personally.
Unprecedented legal action.
And he describes sitting down, reading these dense legal complaints, and feeling this intense, visceral anger. He's reading court documents that paint him as this calculating, malicious villain who deliberately and systematically evaded U.S. anti-money laundering laws to build a criminal empire.
A narrative he completely rejected.
Right. He writes that he felt it was a narrative he completely didn't recognize. He saw himself as an innovator moving fast, not some cartel boss.
This is perhaps the most profound moment of philosophical reflection in the book regarding what he calls the definitional power of government language. He, the ultimate systems architect, realizes that the legal system is, in essence, just another type of matching engine.
That's a fascinating way to frame it. How so?
Well, think about how it functions mechanically. The legal system takes inputs, subpoenaed emails, internal chat log, the absence of robust know-your-customer protocols, and it applies a rigid historical framework of statutes to produce outputs.
And those outputs are verdicts, settlements, and sentences.
Exactly.
It doesn't care that you built a system that processes millions of transactions flawlessly. It doesn't care about the engineering marvel of your server architecture. It doesn't even care that you provided unprecedented financial access to unbanked people in emerging markets who were locked out of the traditional system.
Exactly. The legal matching engine is completely devoid of sentiment regarding your technological achievements. It only asks a binary systemic question. Did you or did you not fulfill your statutory obligations to implement adequate anti-money laundering controls under the Bank Secrecy Act?
And the objective answer, based on the inputs, was no.
The book's essay, Risk Management as a Language, echoes powerfully here. He had to accept a really bitter pill. The government's narrative, regardless of whether he felt it captured the nuance or the well-meaning intentions of his fast-paced startup days, had the ultimate power to define reality.
Because they have the power of enforcement.
Exactly. When the DOJ speaks, their definition becomes the historical record.
And that defined reality forced his hand in a way he never anticipated. November 21st, 2023. A date that genuinely shocked the financial world. He formally steps down as CEO of the company he built from absolutely nothing.
A massive turning point.
He tweets out a statement, and the phrase that sticks out that everyone quoted is, "Let it walk and run."
He pleads guilty to a felony charge of violating the Bank Secrecy Act. The company, as an entity, agrees to pay a historic, staggering $4.3 billion fine to various U.S. agencies.
$4.3 billion, that is astronomical.
And he hands the keys of the entire global ecosystem over to Richard Teng, a former regulator. This signaled a complete shift from a founder-led growth era to a compliance-led maturity era.
I cannot even begin to imagine the profound psychological split of that moment. Imagine you tie your entire identity, your waking hours, your closest friendships, your entire net worth to this one single entity for years.
It's everything you are.
It is your life's work. And then you have to deliberately take a scalpel and sever that tie, amputate yourself from the organization solely so the entity can survive. You have to kill your own identity as a CEO to protect the users and the system you built.
He describes the immediate aftermath of that resignation vividly in the book. He was sitting alone in a Seattle hotel room after the court hearing. He talks about the deafening silence.
The sudden quiet.
His phone, which had buzzed nonstop with global crises, executive decisions, and market updates for 6 relentless years, just went entirely dead. No one needed him to make a decision anymore.
That must have been terrifying.
He writes extensively about the psychological struggle of letting go of control. He had to realize that succession is the natural, healthy order of things, and that a truly robust system must be able to survive the exit of its founder. But knowing that intellectually, as an engineer, and feeling it emotionally as a human being are two drastically different experiences.
And stepping down was really only the beginning of the consequences.
Right.
April 2024. Sentencing day arrives. The prosecution asks the judge for a staggering 36 months in federal prison, arguing they need to send a severe message to the entire crypto industry.
The judge, weighing the massive compliance failures against his unprecedented cooperation and lack of prior offenses, ultimately sentences him to 4 months in custody and levies a $50 million personal fine.
And then this man, who was once the wealthiest tech mogul in crypto, reports to a low-security federal correctional institution in Lampa, California.
He is stripped of his name.
He becomes Inmate 880875 day. The contrast here is just mind-blowing. Think about the arc. We've talked extensively about how he spent his life optimizing milliseconds and high-frequency trading engines.
Right, time was money.
He lived a life where time was the most valuable commodity on Earth, and now he's locked in a system where time is completely static, measured only by 5 daily mandatory head counts by prison guards.
The loss of autonomy is total and absolute. He is stripped of his clothes, given a uniform, stripped of his devices, his connection to the global network,
Cut off from everything.
stripped of his ability to make even the most basic decisions about his day. He is assigned to kitchen duty. The man who orchestrated billion-dollar acquisitions is literally standing at a stainless steel counter chopping onions and peeling potatoes for 3 hours a day.
And this is what makes him who he is. He doesn't let his mind rot.
He can't.
He doesn't succumb to the despair of the environment because he just can't stop optimizing. He starts reading voraciously. He finds books in the prison library on educational psychology. He spends his structured free time in the mornings teaching basic computer literacy skills to other inmates.
Which is incredible.
He observes the intricate social hierarchies, the underground economies, and the unspoken rules of the prison yard.
Because at his core, he is an incurable systems thinker. Even in a federal penitentiary, he is analyzing the environment, mapping the constraints, finding his exact place within the rules, and looking for ways to optimize his limited time.
Always analyzing the system.
He realizes that the systemic design of prison is engineered for sameness. It's designed to systematically strip away your individuality and reduce you to a number. But he recognizes the one vulnerability in their system. They control his physical movement, but they absolutely cannot control the architecture of his mind.
And this realization sparks his next chapter. Stripped of his title, his wealth inaccessible, and his physical liberty gone, what does a builder do with his mind?
He builds.
He looks for a completely new system to build and optimize. And remarkably, while sitting in prison, he conceives of a project called Giggle Academy.
While immersing himself in those texts about educational psychology, he makes a systemic observation. Human potential and intelligence are distributed completely randomly across geography and socioeconomic classes, but access to high-quality education is severely restricted by those exact same borders.
Right, it's a bottleneck.
So he begins to formulate the architectural concept for a free, highly gamified, digitally accessible educational platform aimed at grades 1 through 12, focusing specifically on kids who lack access to traditional schooling.
And he makes a very specific, deliberate structural choice for this new venture, one based entirely on the trauma of his past failures. He decrees that Giggle Academy will have zero revenue.
None.
No monetization, no tokens, no tuition.
This is a crucial evolution in his thinking. If we look at the essay in the book titled Education Beats Excitement, he reflects deeply on how the intense pressure of generating revenue inherently distorts corporate decision-making.
How does he explain that?
Well, at his former company, the visceral excitement of the bull market, the pursuit of volume and fees, often vastly outpaced the responsibility of user education. That dynamic led to avoidable retail losses.
People got hurt because they were moving too fast for profit.
Exactly. By explicitly and permanently removing the revenue requirement from Giggle Academy, he is attempting to build a pure system. A system focused entirely on the mission of knowledge transfer, completely devoid of the moral hazard of profit motives.
He's literally applying the hard-learned, painful lessons of the crypto winter and his compliance failures to elementary education. It's a fascinating pivot.
It shows real growth.
Eventually, he serves his time, he gets released to a halfway house, and finally, he regains his full physical freedom. And then a massive, globally publicized plot twist happens late in 2025.
Yes, the book recounts how, while on a commercial flight, he connects to the Wi-Fi and receives a sudden news alert on his phone. President Donald Trump has granted him a full and unconditional presidential pardon.
Now, let's pause right here. We must explicitly state to you, the listener, that we are not taking a side on the political nature or the validity of this pardon.
Absolutely not.
We are not endorsing either the left-wing or right-wing viewpoints surrounding this event. We are simply reporting the stark dichotomy of public opinion exactly as it is detailed in the book, to illustrate how complex his legacy remains.
The book objectively notes the polarized reaction. On one side, the White House formally framed the pardon as a long overdue recognition of his pioneering role in advancing blockchain technology, cementing American competitiveness in digital assets, and promoting global financial inclusion.
And the other side.
Conversely, prominent political figures, such as Representative Maxine Waters, heavily and publicly criticized the move. She referred to him explicitly as a crypto criminal who endangered national security, labeling the pardon as an act of blatant political favoritism that undermined the justice system.
And he observes this explosive, polarized media reaction from 35,000 feet in the air. He notes in the text that while the pardon legally erases the felony conviction from his official record, it absolutely does not erase the lived experience.
A piece of paper doesn't change history.
A piece of paper doesn't erase the memory of Lompoc, the smell of chopping onions in the prison kitchen, the anxiety of the daily headcounts, or the years of grueling, soul-crushing legal proceedings.
No, it doesn't.
His legacy, despite the pardon, remains this intense battleground of conflicting narratives. To one half of the world, he is a visionary martyr who brought financial freedom to the masses. To the other half, he is a reckless cowboy who enabled illicit finance. It just depends on whose timeline you are reading.
Which forces him, in the final chapters of the memoir, to deeply reconsider the very title of his book and the overarching mission he dedicated his entire adult life to, the freedom of money.
After everything, the billions, the betrayal, the prison time, what does freedom even mean to him by the end of the journey?
It evolves from a technical definition into a philosophical one. He realizes that freedom of money isn't just a technical capability. It isn't just the cryptographic ability to transfer value on a blockchain bypassing a correspondent bank.
It has to be more than that.
It is. True freedom encompasses the freedom of time, the freedom of attention, and the freedom to establish boundaries. And most importantly, he arrives at a profound, hard-earned conclusion.
Yeah.
True freedom fundamentally requires structure.
You cannot have permissionless technology without taking full, uncompromising responsibility for its real-world consequences.
Precisely. If you build a financial system that allows anyone, anywhere in the world, to move money instantly and pseudonymously, you cannot simply hide behind the engineering and say, well, code is neutral, when bad actors inevitably use your beautiful system to fund human trafficking or terrorism.
You have to own it.
The essays Global Money Has Local Consequences and Products Teach Values highlight this ultimate realization. You must proactively build rules, ethical boundaries, and rigorous compliance into the very foundation of the technology itself. Because if you don't police your own system, the traditional systems of the world will inevitably and forcefully crush you.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What an absolutely incredible arc we've explored today.
It's been a journey.
We started with a 12-year-old boy tasting cold, fresh milk for the first time in Vancouver, marveling at the tangible abundance of a new operating system. He grows up to be a brilliant, hyper-focused engineer who learns the rigid, historical skeleton of traditional finance by writing code for the Tokyo Stock Exchange.
He discovers the elegant math of Bitcoin.
Takes a massive, agonizing gamble with his life savings and ends up building the fastest-growing, most powerful financial ecosystem in human history.
He built a company that lived entirely in the cloud, free from terrestrial borders and physical headquarters, moving at the literal speed of light. But that very speed, that very rootlessness that allowed him to conquer the market, inevitably created the systemic blind spots that led to his downfall.
The system broke. He navigated massive hacks, the toxic echo chamber of FUD, the catastrophic contagion of FTX, and finally, the crushing, inescapable weight of the United States legal system.
The billionaire architect becomes Inmate, 880-87510.
Chopping onions and learning that accountability is the ultimate, inescapable cost of innovation.
He learns that while cryptographic code may be flawlessly impartial, the world we actually inhabit is governed by human laws, human fears, and human judgments.
And that leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought, something for you to really chew on and explore on your own long after this deep dive ends. He learned the hard way that you can build the most elegant, permissionless, decentralized technology in the world.
But we still live in a physical world.
Exactly. A physical world governed by strict permission borders and traditional legal frameworks that carry the absolute threat of force. So if we continue to build these unstoppable, decentralized systems, can true freedom of money ever actually exist without someone, somewhere, paying a devastating personal price?
That is the defining technological and moral question of our era.
You know, usually when we talk about building a system, whether it's software or a business, there's this expectation of absolute pristine control. But as history proves, the moment your elegant system touches messy human reality, the compiler breaks, and you are left navigating the muddy waters of consequence. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Don't forget to subscribe to the Strategy Sync YouTube channel for more.